What if I told you that while Jimmy Page was crafting some of rock's most legendary riffs, fellow guitarists were plotting behind the scenes, consumed by pure envy? That's right. While the Led Zeppelin mastermind was revolutionizing guitar playing and building a musical empire, some of rock's biggest names were quietly seething with resentment.
Obviously, in the past, the numbers that we did, we'd worked from the beginning, the initial creation of the album.
From blues legends who watched their techniques get commercialized by a young upstart, to prog rock pioneers who saw their complex compositions overshadowed by Page's stadium-filling anthems.
And try and work out these solos note for note. And that's it. Everyone learned that way as far as...
Today, we're uncovering the bitter feuds, backstage confrontations, and career-long grudges that erupted when musicians realized they'd been outmaneuvered by the wizard himself. We've got stolen riff accusations, publishing disputes, angry interviews, and industry veterans revealing which guitar heroes genuinely despised Page's meteoric rise. Some of these rivalries sparked legal battles that lasted decades, while others festered in silence until explosive public outbursts. Get ready to discover the 6 musicians who were absolutely consumed with jealousy over Jimmy Page's dominance. The final revelation will leave you speechless about rock history's most guarded secrets. 6. Jeff Beck. Jeff Beck possessed technical guitar abilities that made other players weep with envy. His innovative techniques and experimental approach should have made him a household name.
A friend of mine, Jeff, and Jeff and I, we go back to really early teens.
Instead, he watched his former Yardbirds bandmate Jimmy Page become rock royalty, while Beck remained a musician's musician. According to multiple sources, this disparity ate Beck alive for decades. The resentment allegedly began during their Yardbirds days when Beck noticed Page getting more attention despite joining the band later. Former Yardbirds drummer Jim McCarty claims Beck would make snide comments about Page's showmanship, overshadowing pure musical talent. What really stung was the commercial success gap. While Beck was pushing boundaries with jazz fusion and experimental sounds, Page was filling stadiums with simple but effective riffs. Music critic Charles Shar Murray reported that Beck once complained about audiences preferring theatrical performances over genuine innovation. The jealousy became public during interviews where Beck would take subtle digs at guitarists who prioritized spectacle over substance. Former Beck roadie Martin Stone revealed that Beck kept detailed records of Led Zeppelin's sales figures, obsessively comparing them to his own modest numbers. Perhaps most telling was Beck's reaction to Page's Guitar World magazine covers. Multiple photographers reported seeing Beck flip past Page features with visible disgust. Session musician Nicky Hopkins allegedly overheard Beck saying that real guitarists were being ignored, while rock stars collected accolades for basic chord progressions that any competent player could master effortlessly. 5. Richie Blackmore. Richie Blackmore spent years incorporating classical music elements into hard rock, pioneering techniques that influenced generations of players. Then Jimmy Page came along with his mystical imagery and folk influences, somehow becoming the definitive rock guitarist while Blackmore's sophisticated approach remained underappreciated.
Similar area. And like I said, with Jimmy Page, he was in the same village. It's like a village, really, not a...
Industry insiders claim this recognition gap infuriated the Deep Purple legend. The tension reportedly started when Led Zeppelin began outselling Deep Purple, despite Blackmore's superior technical training. Former Purple keyboardist John Lord claimed Blackmore would rant about Page's lack of formal musical education while achieving greater commercial success through pure marketing. What really bothered Blackmore was the critical acclaim. While his classically influenced compositions were dismissed as pretentious, Page's equally complex arrangements were hailed as groundbreaking. Music journalist Jeff Barton remembered Blackmore at a 1973 press conference making pointed comments about guitarists who relied on volume over virtuosity. The rivalry intensified when both bands competed for the same audiences. Former Rainbow manager Bruce Payne alleges that Blackmore became obsessed with outdoing Led Zeppelin stage productions, spending fortunes on elaborate medieval setups that never generated equivalent media coverage. Perhaps most damaging was Blackmore's response to Page's guitar hero status. Multiple sources report that he genuinely resented being overlooked by guitar magazines in favor of Page's more photogenic persona. Former Deep Purple producer Martin Birch allegedly overheard Blackmore saying that serious musicians were losing ground to performers who understood image better than actual musical theory and compositional structure. 4. Eric Clapton. Eric Clapton was hailed as God by his devoted followers.
Got me on my knees, baby.
Respected for his authentic blues interpretation and emotional guitar playing. But while Clapton was perfecting traditional blues forms, Jimmy Page was stealing those same techniques, mixing them with heavy rock, and somehow becoming more famous than the master himself.
He is the most unique guitar player, and the most, probably the most devoted. I mean,
according to close sources, this betrayal left Clapton genuinely bitter. The resentment allegedly began when Page started incorporating blues elements that Clapton had spent years studying and respecting. Former Cream drummer Ginger Baker claims Clapton felt that Page was commercializing sacred musical traditions without paying proper respect to the original artists. What really hurt was the speed of Page's ascension. Clapton had worked for years building his reputation through careful study of blues masters, while Page seemed to achieve instant credibility by simply being louder and more theatrical. Music executive Robert Stigwood remembered Clapton complaining about substance being sacrificed for showmanship. The jealousy became apparent during the Guitar Hero discussions of the early 70s. While critics debated Page versus other players, Clapton's name appeared less frequently despite his obvious technical superiority. Former Derek and the Dominoes bassist Carl Rattle allegedly overheard Clapton saying that real blues playing was being overshadowed by circus acts. Perhaps most revealing was Clapton's reaction to Stairway to Heaven's success. Multiple industry figures report that he was genuinely frustrated seeing a song with basic blues progressions become rock's ultimate anthem, while his more authentic interpretations received less recognition. Former manager Robert Stigwood claimed Clapton spent months analyzing why audiences preferred Page's theatrical approach over his genuine emotional expression. 3. Tony Iommi. Tony Iommi literally invented heavy metal guitar playing after losing his fingertips in a factory accident. Developing techniques that became the foundation of an entire genre. But while Iommi was creating something completely new, Jimmy Page was getting credit for pioneering heavy rock, despite building on existing foundations.
And I said to Bill, oh, forget that, I said, we don't want to go there. I said, as far as I know, he can't sing.
Industry veterans claim this misattribution drove the Black Sabbath guitarist to distraction. The frustration reportedly began when music critics started crediting Led Zeppelin with inventing heavy music, while ignoring Sabbath's earlier and more extreme contributions. Former Sabbath bassist Geezer Butler claims Iommi would collect articles praising Page's heaviness, while dismissing Sabbath as a novelty act. What really annoyed Iommi was the technique recognition. Despite revolutionizing guitar playing through physical adversity, Page received more praise for relatively standard techniques presented with better production values. Music journalist Lester Bangs remembered Iommi at a 1971 interview making bitter comments about guitarists who achieved fame through marketing rather than innovation. The rivalry intensified when both bands competed for the heaviest sound. Former Sabbath manager Patrick Meehan alleges that Iommi became obsessed with proving his guitar work was more groundbreaking than Page's, constantly pushing for heavier recordings that record labels resisted. Perhaps most telling was Iommi's reaction to Page's guitar tone praise. Multiple sources report that he genuinely resented seeing Page celebrated for sounds that Iommi had pioneered years earlier with less recognition. Former Sabbath producer Roger Bain allegedly overheard Iommi saying that real innovators were being forgotten while copyists received all the accolades and historical credit for musical developments they had merely popularized rather than created. 2. Keith Richards. Keith Richards built his reputation on creating the most memorable guitar riffs in rock history. crafting the backbone of countless Rolling Stones classics. Then Jimmy Page started receiving praise for his riff-writing abilities, somehow encroaching on Richards' territory, while the Stones guitarist watched his own contributions get overshadowed. According to band insiders, this invasion of his specialty absolutely infuriated Richards.
Jimmy, that you've been doing some stuff with the Stones.
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
Well, when I was in New York at the end of the tour,
The jealousy allegedly began when music critics started comparing Page's riffs to Richards' legendary creations, often favoring the Led Zeppelin guitarist's more complex arrangements. Former Stones producer Jimmy Miller claims Richards would obsessively study Page's compositions, looking for weaknesses while grudgingly acknowledging their effectiveness. What really bothered Richards was the technical praise. While his riffs were dismissed as simple but catchy, Page's equally straightforward progressions were analyzed as sophisticated compositions. Music journalist Nick Kent remembered Richards at a 1974 recording session making sarcastic comments about guitarists who received undeserved intellectual credit. The rivalry became personal when both guitarists competed for the same session musicians and producers. Former Stones manager Alan Klein alleges that Richards deliberately avoided working with anyone associated with Led Zeppelin, fearing his ideas might be shared with the competition. Perhaps most damaging was Richards' reaction to Page's songwriting royalties. Multiple sources report that he was genuinely angry about Page's publishing success, feeling that his own equally valuable contributions were generating less income. Former Stones assistant Joe Bergman allegedly overheard Richards saying that real riff masters were being financially overshadowed by pretenders who understood business better than music, creating lasting resentment about the industry's reward system. 1. Jimi Hendrix. Jimi Hendrix revolutionized electric guitar playing, creating sounds that nobody thought possible and establishing himself as the instrument's ultimate innovator. But in his final years, according to those closest to him, Hendrix became increasingly obsessed with Jimmy Page's rising fame, watching Led Zeppelin's success with growing paranoia and resentment that may have contributed to his tragic downward spiral. Former experienced bassist Noel Redding claimed that Hendrix collected every Led Zeppelin album and would play them repeatedly, analyzing Page's techniques while muttering about inferior players receiving superior recognition. The jealousy reportedly intensified when critics began comparing the two guitarists, often suggesting that Page's more structured approach was aging better than Hendrix's experimental chaos. What really disturbed Hendrix was the commercial trajectory. While his own album sales were declining and his performances becoming increasingly erratic, Led Zeppelin was achieving massive success with a more disciplined approach to psychedelic rock. Music executive Alan Douglas remembered Hendrix at a 1970 recording session, saying that audiences were abandoning true innovation for safer alternatives. The obsession became destructive when Hendrix started incorporating Page-influenced techniques into his playing, abandoning his unique style in favor of more conventional approaches. Former drummer Mitch Mitchell allegedly told friends that Hendrix was losing his musical identity while chasing someone else's success. 6 legendary guitarists consumed by jealousy over Jimmy Page's incredible success. From blues masters to metal pioneers, even the greatest players couldn't handle Page's dominance. Which rivalry surprised you most? Hit that like button. Drop your thoughts in the comments, subscribe for more rock secrets, and ring that notification bell.